Hello and welcome to our 7th instalment of our tour through the Major Arcana on Let's Talk Tarot. Today we are talking about the Chariot card, so if you haven't already, please subscribe below and get yourself ready, make yourself a cup of tea, and join us as we talk about this card, its meaning and its symbolism. Welcome back, guys. So this is our last card in our first septenary. If you don't quite know what I'm talking about, go and take a look at our Major Arcana introduction episode. I'll put a link up there. Talking about the 3 sets of 7 in the tarot. This is the first set of 7 that we're doing, and we're now completing it on the 7th card. There's quite a bit to talk about, especially in reference to other cards in the series. So go and grab your deck if you haven't already and get ready. So as always, I will be looking at the number, the imagery and symbolism, the title, the name, and talking about some of its meanings and associations. If you are new to the channel, I use 2 different decks to illustrate it, and the people that have watched more episodes, you can just shut off for a couple of minutes as I explain. So I am using, let's put it the same way as every other episode, I am using the Tarot of Marseille, a Marseille-based deck. This is the Veritable Tarot de Marseille that was restored by Kris Hadar, who is a Canadian tarologist, if that's a word. And this is the style of tarot from about peaking in the 18th century. This specific deck was modelled after a 1760 deck called the Conver deck by a guy called Nicholas Conver, and this is the kind of the French style of tarot. This is the Golden Dawn inspired Rider-Waite-Smith deck by artist Pamela Coleman Smith under the direction of A.E. Waite. Quite a lot of the imagery in this card is based on the Western esoteric schools and occult schools like the Golden Dawn, of which A.E. Waite was a member. This is early 20th century with late 19th century influences, and it is kind of modern, and it's pretty much standard. So these 2 decks are like the majority standardized decks in tarot. So the normal thing is that your deck will either be based on one or the 2. It'll either be based on the symbolism here or the symbolism here. In this card, they're quite similar. In other cards, they're a little bit different, including number 6 that we've just done. So go and take a look at that and you see what I mean. Very briefly, before this, you've got Italian historic tarot like the Solabusca, like the Visconti Sforza, and some Italian stuff. Then you've got the French period. You've got the French occult kind of associations here, and some of the French occult tarots. And I'm lumping in Oswald Wirth there, who was Swiss, but I'm lumping him with the French occultists anyway. Sorry. And they retroactively fit some occultism to this style of tarot. And then you've kind of got the Golden Dawn formulating about here, and members of the Golden Dawn having their own designed tarot, of which none survived. And then A.E. Waite, a member of the Golden Dawn, redesigned this deck with Pamela Coleman Smith. And then you've got future of tarot from kind of 1920s onwards, including famous decks such as the Thoth and other decks that may not be similar and have had an influence, but we focus on these 2. So there will be links below in the description to these tarot decks on Amazon if you are interested in picking them up. I always use this as my standard reading deck, so I highly recommend this. I use this, I used to use this a lot. This is kind of the style of tarot that I kind of learned on but I don't tend to read from this anymore. I tend to use this more in terms of teaching and demonstrations. So that's the 2 tarot cards. People that have watched videos, you can tune back in. I am sorry for that little brief dalliance away from the topic. So let us look at the name, because this one's quite easy. The Chariot doesn't change. It's the Chariot here and the Chariot here. Chariot is obviously referring to the vehicle, not the charioteer. The person in the vehicle is not referring to the horses or the sphinxes either. So when we're talking about this, don't just consider what it would be like for the charioteer to drive this chariot, also consider what it's like for the chariot moving forward. Cool. I can't think of many changes to this. The card that I will show you on the Maddenese style, which is Marseille, slightly earlier than the Conquest deck, does look like it says Le Chariot, but I've not really looked into that and seen whether it is actually an alternative spelling or an alternative name, but so you might see that. So this traditionally in the Marseille tradition is where some of the makers stamp their maker's mark. I'm not quite sure what SAM is referenced to. It might be something that Kris Hadar put in as a memorial or a self-interest. So sometimes you see a nameplate on this card. So let us talk about the number. 7s are interesting. As I mentioned in the last video, sometimes 7s are seen as perfection because we've got like the 7 moving spheres, the 7 planets, as well as sets of 7. There's quite a lot of sets of 7 in John's Gospel in the Bible, on that principle, that Gnostic principle of 7 being perfection. And so I think the, off the top of my head, and this is going back to my theology days, I think there's a reference to 7s in John's Gospel when we're talking about the water into wine. I think that there was 7 flasks there. That there was 6 flasks of water and the 7th was wine. But correct me if I'm wrong. There's comments below. Shout at me, especially if the Christians amongst us. Feel free to tell me off. So 7 can be about perfection. However, in cartomancy, 7s can kind of pose as a challenge or a problem. That is because if you remember the 6s formed a little path, yeah? So the 6s line up, the pips line up into a path. This was a path lined with diamonds, a path lined with riches, path to riches. In the 7, we've got an extra dot that falls there. So let me just turn this the other way around because it'll look nicer. This is an obstacle in our path. Yeah. So this is the road, and then there's something in the path. This particular card, the 7 of Spades, is like problem of problems. This is the card of misery. But here we're just looking at the 7. It can be maybe a problem. However, the way the tarot kind of sees it is kind of like struggles. But if you struggle through, there'll be victory, there'll be good things. You just need to struggle through. It's just hardship. So that kind of working through problems and kind of getting out to the other side is a huge part of it. There is a couple of other bits about 7 in numerology, and that's kind of around about knowledge and assessment. I wasn't quite going to do this, but I'll do it anyway. So as I normally do, a kind of little number doodle. The core numbers that make up 7 are 3 and 4, yeah? Three was, if you remember from our previous videos, and if you haven't watched them, please go and watch them. The 3 can be like spirit. It can also be growth. And 4s are about the material and can kind of also mean hard work, yeah? See where I get that from? Hard work, material growth. It can be about farmers, people that work the land, hard work. So it's about kind of growth through hard work. It can also be about, which you'll see a bit later, spirit over matter. It can also be matter over spirit, as we talked about on the 5th tarot card, the Pope. But that's the kind of the key number points on that, and we'll see those symbols as we go into the kind of the hidden symbols in the card bit that I kind of love doing, because I get to draw over tarot cards. Win. So that's the kind of the number theory behind it. Yeah, so we're looking at a type of perfection or a victory or an achievement that is kind of hard won. That is in numerology, they apply that principle to anything. So for example, 7 is quite a spiritual number, but people that are number 7 often do pretty well in academia because they are hardworking. It's that spirituality through hard work. So they like that kind of grind and that hard work to kind of gain something at the end. You know, like a really good maths puzzle or a fantastically killer Sudoku. You know, that kind of, I've really worked hard and yes, I finally got the solution. That kind of solution solving thing is something about 7s. So we should look at the symbolism. This is quite an in-depth symbolic tarot card. Let me show you the hidden symbols and then we'll talk about the overt symbols. I normally do it the other way, but I think it will be better if I do it reversed today. So let me drop you to the desktop and let's see whether I can get my Wacom working, which is always a fun challenge. Yes, I can. Wonderful. So what color have I got? Oh, that's Celton Alpha. We don't want that. We want a paintbrush. So let me just grab this up. Sorry about this. I should have set this up before. There you go. Cool. Okay. So this 4 and 3. So we can see a 3 here. We can see this triangle. Red wasn't the best choice, was it? Like this. Let me just change to green. There you go. So we can see the 3 here, and we can see a block here. Yeah, so this is that 3 and 4, that spirit over matter. We can also see the 4 and the 4 pillars, and sometimes these are referred to as like the 4 building blocks, and this is kind of matter personified. So the 4 elements, the 4 animals, the 4 cardinal directions. So this is the 4. Then you can see that between the animals, the human and the horses, is also a 3. So we've also got that 3-4 thing going here. We also have we also can see this as being a triangle, this being the 4 cube. That's so messy. And then this being a duad, a 2, a binary. So we can see this as well. Yeah, so those are all kind of there, hidden in amongst the madness. We will make a reference to these symbols in a second. The horses, you can see, look like they're kind of going in 2 different directions. This is talking about the charioteer's sense of control, that the horses may be going into 2 different directions, but that chariot is going to be driven forward. So this is once again that hard work breeding success, you know, working hard but kind of getting success out of it. Yes, it's going to be a little bit hard work kind of drawing them together, but it's still done. You can also see these wheels that look like they kind of fit on the wrong side. One's under my arrow here. So the other way that people can sometimes see that is like the charioteer is subverting his impulses, or controlling his desires and his impulses in order to kind of move forward. And there is this putting sexual urges into line to kind of move forward kind of aspect, and I'll show you that in the Rider-Waite card. So those are the kind of the hidden shapes in this card. We've got a 4-pillared canopy, we have a hard block here, and we've also got the trilogy of animals. Cool. So that was nice and simple, but it does kind of go over those quite well. And there's the card finally. Right. So let us now look at these cards when my camera zooms in. There you go. So there is a lot of similarities in this card, but there's an awful lot of differences as well. And the differences are minute, but they are there. So the canopy here is yellow in the Rider-Waite-Smith, in the Tarot de Marseille, and in the Rider-Waite-Smith it is the starred canopy, and the star canopy links it to that celestial force. So we've got that. We can see that these horses have become sphinxes. This is the big thing. If you remember, I made a mention that some of the tarot's history was considered for a while to be ancient Egyptian as the Book of Thoth, and that is the reason why the Thoth deck is so named as the Thoth deck, and that is the reason why quite a lot of the modern decks have kind of Egyptian elements in it. They mistook it as an ancient book of Egyptian wisdom. So they saw it as a kind of continued trend that this book was being used as cards, and thus it had survived generations. Obviously that's poppycock, but it does kind of mean that we get Egyptian elements. If you see his robe, you can kind of, it's zooming in and out, but you can kind of just see these kind of almost hieroglyphics on this kind of skirty part of his armor. I'm sure that there's an official term for it. But you'll see quite a lot of this Egyptian symbolism in some of the tarot cards, and this one's quite overt. The reason A.E. Waite put the Sphinxes in this card was because Eliphas Levi, who was a French defrocked priest and occultist, who wrote some of the biggest books on Western occultism, and quite a lot of modern occultism kind of stems from his work. He wrote about the question of the Sphinx and the story of Oedipus. Oedipus approaches the Sphinx, and the idea is that the Sphinx asks a question, and if you get it wrong, the Sphinxes devour you, they eat you. There was 2 or 3 versions of this question in Eliphas Levi. The first version, and I'm going to read this out, is: how is the tetrad changed into the duad and explained by the triad? So these are the terms that we were kind of using about number theory. So how is the tetrad 3 it changed into the duad 2 and explained by the triad? Oh, it was the tetrad is the 4 rather. Sorry, triad 3. So that's quite an odd question, and it's a little bit tricky to understand it. And the Sphinx also asks it in a human way. He says, "How does something go from 4 arms to 2 arms to 3 arms?" And then finally the question is kind of phrased as how is the 4 of the Greeks linked to the 3 of the alchemists, that kind of thing. So the answer was man. Oedipus said it's man, and thus the Sphinx was destroyed in front of him. The idea of man is that it goes from 4 legs, or 4 arms crawling on the floor as a baby, to 2, the duad, walking on 2 legs, to the triad, which is the 3 legs, which is the walking stick. So you've got 2 legs and a walking stick. So the idea was that Oedipus understood the limitations and the weaknesses of being a human. The way that links into the 4 of the Greeks and that kind of thing is this idea that the Greeks have 4 base principles. They have the 4 elements. Other countries do not. Like, China has 5 base elements. The the Indians' Ayurvedic system has 5 elements, but they express themselves in 3 different doshas. So all these systems seem to be different, and why are they different, and what's the common denominator? Well, it's man. Man makes mistakes. Man makes interpretations based on their understanding of the world. And it's that limitation and that knowledge of one's own weaknesses which meant that Oedipus defeated the Sphinx. And it is for that reason that A.E. Waite put these Sphinxes in this card. So the idea is that this charioteer is symbolizing Oedipus, and he's answered the Sphinx's question right, and that is demonstrated by having these 2 Sphinxes on the bottom. So he understands his weakness, and in some ways he looks like he's a sovereign. He looks like he's a king. Rachel Pollack makes a fantastic reference to how these parades in ancient Rome, where a victorious soldier would be paraded around on chariot, haven't really changed. We've just changed the chariot to limousine, and then had someone hanging out the top of it. Love it. It's very true. So in some ways he looks sovereign, he looks kingly, but he is not, as A. Waite says, he's not a hereditary ruler. He's not, his dad's not a king, he's not descended from royalty, and he's not of the priesthood. He is not someone that has learned secret wisdom. He is very much a man that's got to his position through hard work and learning and just toil. And that means he's a king of the material. He's a sovereign of the material world and not the godly and spiritual. And that's quite important, because we're looking at the end of the first septenary. We are looking at the end of the first set of 7, which is about the mundane world, the material world. We're not talking about spiritually won secrets. So he is a master of the first septenary. He's the master of the material and the mundane world. Cool. Okay. So to demonstrate that, he's got this little kind of square on his breastplate and plate, and that means the material world, the earth. It's the symbol of earth. The other bit about these sphinxes and these horses is that they are different colours. They are obviously opposites. So the charioteer is one that draws these opposites into unity. And this is kind of a familiar thread that we've seen through a few cards. This sense of I feel like I'm about to sneeze. This drawing 2 binary opposites into some sense of unity, and we've seen that in several other cards. So black and white, red and blue, going in opposite directions. He is drawing everything together. So the charioteer is a bit of advice into deciding your destination, deciding your goal, pulling together your resources, even if they're scattered everywhere, and just driving it to that goal and getting victory from that goal. It's going to be hard. It's going to not be the most smoothest journey, but it is a sense of victory. So we've got this duality of opposites. We also have the duality of opposites in this symbol here. Now, there is 2 definitions, and one of the definitions is less talked about. The simple and definition that everyone bands around is that this is the lingam and yoni of Indian philosophy. So the lingam is this straight line thing here, the lingam stone, and the yoni is this circular with a hole through it. This is the conjunction of genitalia. There's no other way of putting it. This is sexual fulfillment, and the charioteer is over it, showing that he can put his sexual desires in part, subliminate them in order to drive his chariot forward. But it's also about that kind of achievement, that victory. And I'm really sorry for saying this as a gay man, it pains me, but this kind of sense of conquest. Oh god, feeling like a man. So this is also an opposites combining, and opposites of unity. The other definition that's not really talked about is that Papus, a French occultist, said that it's the lingam surrounded by, well, in his version of the cards, the lingam surrounded by the sphere of Egypt. I'm not quite sure what he means here. I mean, this was before this card was invented. It was based on his drawings of the card, which were used by Pamela Coleman Smith to refer to, and A.E. would have made mention of what he wanted on the card. So it would have been taken from there, and it may have looked a little bit similar to this. He had the lingam, the kind of the male principle, and I'm sorry for this next word, penetrating the sphere of Egypt on this card. So there's that as well. Cool. Penetrating the mysteries of Egypt. Let's keep to that. These are in both cards. These are referred to as Urim and Thummim. Urim and Thummim. I'm sorry for the Hebrew speakers out there that I've just screwed up something that's very kind of religious to the Jewish people. So Urim and Thummim, however you want to say it, is supposedly the two of the stones that were on the high priest's breastplate in Israel, and they were used, let me just drop up, they were used in a type of divination that was, this is listed in the book of Samuel, that was kind of used to see whether someone was guilty or innocent. So there's not really a great way of seeing it. Some people think it's kind of like sortilege, that you cast the stones on the breastplate and saw how they landed, and that would kind of give you a yes, they're guilty, no, they're not guilty. There are some scholars that seem to say it suggests that the letters on the 12 stones would kind of rearrange into words in a kind of a magical way. Who knows? But they're the kind, these two polar stones, black and white, that were symbolically about saying whether someone's guilty or innocent. And there is some translations of them, but they're all rumoured translations. No one really knows what Urim and Thummim mean precisely. So those are supposedly those. They're kind of like half moony shapes that are on the shoulders of the warrior here. The other thing is obviously the staff or the stave. It's held not so high. It is held under the dominion of the charioteer. So this is indicating that everything is under his will. Even the majesty or divine is under his will. Here, A.E. Waite refers to this as a sword. I think that's a little bit of jiggery-pokery. I think that this is a Golden Dawn Lotus wand. It looks a little bit like a Golden Dawn Lotus wand. And I think he's just kind of saying sword. He refers to it as a broadsword, which is most definitely not. And he's definitely not gripping it by the blade. So I think he's just trying to hide the fact that this is a Golden Dawn Lotus wand. Which he sometimes does, tries to kind of hide some of what he would see as initiation-bound secrets. So this here is a wand, and it's underneath the authority and the willpower of this, and quite a lot of this card is about willpower. It's about driving forward. So So the way that these are looking is that the Chariot here is looking slightly downwards and slightly out of the frame. This is kind of symbolizing reflecting on what's happened and how he's kind of got there. So it is talking about that kind of hard won aspects. Here the Charioteer is looking directly at us. And as with the majority of Pamela Coleman Smiths, they all very, very kind of frontal. The horses here are both looking to the left, but also kind of unruly. What else is there? There is the star on the crown. So he is crowned like a sovereign, but we've spoken about that. He's kind of the sovereign of the material world. He's a bit like the emperor in his youth. If you remember, we saw the emperor wearing armor underneath his robes. We knew that he was a victor of war. He had kind of not inherited the throne, but kind of got it through a lot of experience. Well, this could be him in his youth. So he's got this 8-pointed star. 8-pointed stars are traditionally seen as somewhere lying between a square and a circle. Just take my word on that. So it's kind of between the material and the spiritual. Yeah, but he's in no means like a very spiritual person. The only other thing in terms of the symbolism, the imagery of this, well, other than what's behind him. So let's quickly make a mention. There's a river behind. Some people refer to this as showing that the Chariot also has to kind of go with the flow. And then there's this city behind him. The only other aspect of this that's talked about is that how it combines symbols of the previous cards in this. So shall we do that together? Okay, so let us go through pairs as they are. So we're not doing the full yet. Here's the first kind of pair, I suppose. Yep. So out of these two cards, they total number 7. Out of these two cards, you have this angel with wings and this this wand. Yeah. And here we have the angel of wings rolling over 2 things, and we have this wand. Okay. So that's how that combines those 2 symbols. The next 2 are 2 and 6. 2 and 5 rather. 2 and 5 make 7. Here we are. This is really quite a striking similarity. You can see them almost immediately. Let us refer to the Hierophant here with the 2 pillars, and also let's kind of point out these 2. We've got the 2 pillars here at the front. Yeah, we can tell it's these 2 pillars because there isn't a veil between these 2. It's the back 2. And we've also got a man ruling over 2 subjects. Here we have 2 pillars with a veil. And here we have 2 pillars with a veil. Yeah, so those 2 are represented in that card too. And then finally, we have the 3 and 4. I think that this is a personification of this. We've got a man in armor, victory after war. Although, you know, the posture's very similar, and then looking at the throne, it's very similar as well. And then the high priest, the empress. Well, good question. Let me see. The crown, maybe the diadem crown. Here's a crown and here's a crown. This is an 8-pointed star and this is not, but you can also see this victory wreath that's on both of them, and the river behind is on the river behind. Yep. So some tarot people will say that this combines all the other cards that have kind of gone before, almost like they are little learning lessons on the way to get to this card, and it's kind of taken a little bit on the way to everything. Cool. So the meanings of this card are relatively simple now. because we have that struggling from the 7, we've got that knowledge and assessment from the 7, and that perfection from the 7. The perfection is about the unity of opposites, and about how the charioteer puts his opposing forces inside himself in balance in order to drive forward. They're not in unity too much, but they are in balance enough for him to drive forward. So those could be the id and the ego. They can, if you're more kind of a psychological reader, these can be the subconscious and the conscious. They can be the sexual drives. They can be, those kind of base instincts, and he puts those into unity, drive forward. 7s are about hard-won success and victory, and this card is about victory, but it's also about what's kind of gone before. This man is celebrating the victory of a battle. It's not been easy to get there. The other meanings are external conquest. That's a good one. We're looking at a hard-won thing in the mundane world, because we are on the first 7. We are looking at a hard-won victory in the material world. We're not looking at a spiritual victory. We are looking at a material victory, and this is the square on his breastplate. We are also looking at the rule of spiritual over material, the rule of the will over the material plane. We are also looking at a sovereignty, as I said, and control. That's the other key word. So control, about controlling these two opposite forces. So if this came up in a spread around a work situation, it is control your instincts to kind of lash out or attack. This is going to be hard, but keep driving forward and just do it courageously and show some courage. Courage is a good one around this card. So that kind of gives you some basic insight into the meanings. I felt a little bit waffly there. I apologize. So that is the symbolism, the number, the imagery, and the hidden symbols in that card, as well as some of the meanings of that card and how they link together. That's quite a deep card. I want to say deep card because there was just so many symbols and tiny little bits, so I hope you stayed with me to the end. I know that would have been a little bit challenging and you might have had to watch that in pieces, so I hope that was helpful. I hope that has helped you with some of the meanings, especially when they try to come out of the symbolism of the card and the number of the card, and I hope that has helped illustrate the Rider-Waite-Smith and the Tarot de Marseille. For those of you that are part of my Patreon and do support me on there, thank you so much. There will be a handout or a cheat sheet uploaded already of this card, its hidden symbols and meanings, that you can download and scribble over and use for your notes. If you do not follow me on Patreon, why not? There is a link below in the description and you get a lot of extra stuff, including the cheat sheets, including the handouts, and including extra content and extra lessons, as well as me goofing around with new decks, showing different spreads and ways of interpreting. So cool stuff. Thank you so much for your attention, and I hope that has been helpful. Feel free to put comments below on anything that you want me to focus on or answer, or you're unsure about, and I will do my best to answer those. The next card is on the next septenary, the next set of 7. It is the 8th card, which is different in both decks, so I will be doing the same card in both, so it will be strength. So I look forward to seeing you on that. Take care, bye.